Chapter 4, Nasati, Stages 1 to 4, having dealt with the necessary qualifications and the posture of the person who is to develop mindfulness. The Buddha went on to speak of the successive steps in concentrating on the breathing, as follows. 1. Breathing out long, he knows, I am breathing out long, breathing in long, he knows, I am breathing in long. 2. Breathing out short, he knows, I am breathing out short, breathing in short, he knows, I am breathing in short. 3. Experiencing the whole body, of breath, I shall breathe out, thus he trains himself. Experiencing the whole body, I shall breathe in, thus he trains himself. 4. Calming the bodily formation, I shall breathe out, thus he trains himself. Calming the bodily formation, I shall breathe in, thus he trains himself. These 4 stages are collectively called the first tetrad of mindfulness of breathing. Various points of practice must be explained at length before the next tetrad can be dealt with. On a certain level, the practice of this, the first tetrad, is complete in itself. From it the meditator may proceed directly to the practice of insight, vipassana, without passing through the second and third tetrads. This being the case, this first tetrad is worth considering in some detail. Stage 1, breathing out long, he knows, I am breathing out long, breathing in long, he knows, I am breathing in long. This stage deals primarily with the long in and out breathing. What needs to be understood is the word breathing itself. In order to understand long breathing, the meditator should practice breathing in and out as long as he can and observing, so that he gets to know just what the longest breath is like. Then he should compare this with the shorter than normal breath, as at a time of fatigue, so that he is able to recognize just how short or long his breaths are.
Lastly, he should make the experiment of intentionally breathing as short as he can in order to make a further comparison. In the end, he will know what way long breathing from short breathing and what they are actually like. He will be able to concentrate in the right way on the long and short breathings as required. In the long breathing practice, each breath, that is, each incoming breath and each outgoing breath, may take as long as 30 to 40 seconds. This practice will be successful only if the meditator breathes completely relaxed and sits perfectly upright. In making the longest possible in-breath, he will note that the abdomen contracts to the maximum and the chest expands to the maximum. Conversely, on making the longest possible out-breath, the abdomen expands to the maximum and the chest contracts to the maximum. Such breathing can really be called the longest in the sense of both distance and time. To see this properly, the meditator should examine also the short breathing for the sake of comparison. Short breathing has the opposite manifestations. On the in-breath the abdomen expands, on the out-breath it contracts. It can be seen that the reason for this is that so little breath is taken in that the upper portion of the chest expands and contracts hardly at all. So the manifestations at the abdomen are just the opposite of those associated with long breathing. The meditator must know just how to observe, otherwise he will misunderstand and become completely confused. As a guiding principle, an in-breath is short if it causes the chest to expand only a little while not causing the abdomen to contract at all. If a breath does cause the abdomen to contract, it is to be considered long. Conversely, to breathe out short is to breathe out only so much as to make the chest contract slightly and not so much as to make the abdomen expand. If the abdomen does expand, the breath is to be considered long.
The criterion is the degree of contraction of the chest. The movements at the abdomen will always be the opposite of those at the chest, at least in the case of long breathing. Anyone who has studied carefully the respiratory system will follow this account quite easily. With regard to breathing long, the commentaries advise us to observe 2 kinds of animals. In animals of the first kind, such as the elephant, the duration of the breathing is longer than in animals of the second kind, such as mice and rabbits. So, to speak in terms of time and describe the breathing as slow or rapid amounts to the same thing as to say that the breathing is long or short. What has been said here applies only to what the meditator observes. The actual quantity of air entering and leaving is quite a different question. Another point to be observed is whether the breath is heavy or light, coarse or fine. If the air strikes the nostrils violently, the breathing is described as heavy or coarse. If it does not strike the nostrils violently, so that the contact is not felt, the breathing is spoken of as light or fine. These two characteristics of breathing should be understood as well, because they are relevant to the following steps. We come now to the various ways of concentrating on the breathing. Here the practice consists in first testing all the organs concerned with respiration, such as nostrils, palate, windpipe, lungs, and so on. Making sure they are in normal and fit condition, and letting the breath move in its natural way. Occasionally forcing it to be longer or shorter than normal. This preparatory step is intended to familiarize the meditator first of all with the natural rate of breathing, which is normally constant. Having done this, he should begin examining just how long or short the breathing is. Whether the breathing is short or long depends on the state of the mind and the condition of the body, in fact. No sooner does one start taking an interest in the breathing.
So in the first step, the meditator must observe how the length of the breath changes according to circumstances. For example, if the state of mind is normal, the breathing is long, and if the state of mind is bad, as when there is anger, the breathing is short and abrupt. Again, when the body is at ease, the breathing is longer than when it is in some abnormal condition owing to fatigue or the like. In whatever condition the breathing happens to be, as soon as the meditator concentrates on it, it is naturally bound to become longer. He must be aware, then, of changes in the breathing in this respect as well. Only then will he be able to concentrate on the breathing and observe how long or short it is. When he has concentrated on the breathing for a considerable time, he will be more acutely aware of the length or shortness of it. In the beginning, the meditator should breathe as roughly and as slowly as possible in order to observe what the breathing itself is like. How it strikes the nostril as it enters, where it appears to terminate, where and for how long it stops before reversing direction. If he breathes lightly and finely from the very beginning, he will be unable to observe these things and will find it difficult to concentrate on the breath, perhaps so difficult that he fails completely in the attempt. In addition, it is advisable for the meditator to breathe so roughly and heavily that a sound is produced which is audible to himself. The ears are helpful in concentrating on breathing. Actually, to establish mindfulness on the breathing is to concentrate not on the air itself, but on the surface of the skin where the air strikes. Air, being so fine and intangible, is very difficult to observe, but when it happens to strike the surface of the skin at a sensitive spot, it is easy to detect its presence and to observe the duration of the contact.
And when there is an audible sound as well, it is all the more easy to observe how long or short the breaths are. This is the advantage of breathing heavily in the beginning. Even in the later stages of the practice, the meditator will find it advantageous to breathe deeply and heavily until he has become used to it and it has become a habit. This will always be beneficial to the training in succeeding stages, quite apart from being very good for bodily health. It is advisable, then, to train oneself to breathe deeply and heavily in a natural way at every opportunity. Now we come to the point where the breathing has become naturally long as a result of attention having been directed towards it. This concentrating is simply the act of fixing attention on the breathing, which is moving in and out in its own way. We may also say that it is observation of the breathing in a certain state and at a certain time. But we prefer the clear and vivid definition found in the meditation manuals and the Abhidhamma, tying the mind to the breathing with the tether of mindfulness. So now we have to study at least three things: breathing, mind, and mindfulness. In addition, we have to study the various results of this, tying the mind to the breathing. The first of these three things, the breathing, has already been discussed. Now for the second one, the mind. The mind has previously been absorbed in all manner of worldly objects. Now it is being deprived of them and made fast to the breathing with the tether of mindfulness. It will no longer be allowed to mingle with those worldly objects as it has done so far. Mindfulness is a wholesome mental factor, or CT. It serves to lift or draw the mind and tie it to the breathing, which is purely physical but not a basis for unwholesome states. So through the power of this factor of mindfulness, the mind can become free from the unwholesome and attain to the wholesome. In this step, there is still only concentration, knowledge, or